obviously couldn't do it slowly from a government viewpoint. Why? Well, because the slower it is, the more resistance that would be allowed. And if there was something really nasty in the vaccine, you wouldn't want people dropping dead from it before you got everybody inoculated, right? Mm-hmm. So from their viewpoint, if they were going to do forced vaccinations, they'd have to do it in a rush, in a hurry. And yes, there's a couple of points of entry, like school kids and so on. However, that's a separate issue we need to talk about. But just imagine what they would need to do something in a hurry. A, they would have to have enough doses to do the whole population or close. B, they would have to have it distributed evenly throughout the country to those points of centers where they would need to be able to, or have to get at it in order to be able to inoculate, which pretty much brings it down to virtually all the healthcare areas. Say that you just decided you were going to do it out of the your local county communicable disease subset. Well, you'd have to get to every single county in the U.S. You'd have to have the census tell you how many people were in that county, and then you'd have to have the appropriate level of vaccine there in order to start this and do it in a short period of time. Now, the reason I'm going through the detail here is because it gets real important real quick. Even if you were able to accomplish that, which is to drive all these trucks with all the vaccine and get it all distributed, and you had a mechanism and it all worked, then you're going to need people to enforce the vaccine being given on everyone else. And basically, in our country, our calculations say that in order for that to occur, you would actually really need 1 out of 5 people to be an enforcer on the other 4. And so if we had a compliant population and you had 1/5 of the population just all volunteer to be enforcers on the other 4, then they're still going to have to get trained on what they have to do. They're still going to have to be motivated, put into a position to where they're going to be there, etc. And so, and besides which, in 300 million people, you're looking at the having to motivate and move 50 or 60 million people as enforcers, and then the logistics support for them, which involves, several other million people. And so the manpower does not exist for the idea.
It does exist. I was just listening to Frankly Speaking, and they are hiring somewhere up in Michigan or whatever. They are hiring the unemployed to be guards at the FEMA detention camps. They're advertising for it. We've got this massive amount of unemployed. Do you think an unemployed person wouldn't work for $100 a day, rounding up all of the people that haven't gotten their shots?
Sure, I'm sure they would not do that. I mean, you'd find some cases, but what are you going to do? Are you going to give all these unemployed people guns and then tell them go out and round up these fellows? It isn't going to work. I mean, you're assuming that the unemployed would be able to be folded into a military fashion. Look at the trouble that we had in World War II, getting all those goons.
What about the Acorn people? They are already training in a military fashion. I've seen the
but how many Acorn people are there? Are there 60 million of them? No. Acorn people are, I'm sorry?
We would have to have 60 million, is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. In order to have this be effective and be able to do it in a short period of time, you would need 60 million people involved in the delivery and the enforcement of the delivery. And we don't have that large of a structure within our nation. China would find it difficult with their 500 million people in basically their armed forces. Mm-hmm. I mean, they would have a hard time. Our government is going to have a hard time doing this under any level of coercion. And you notice that usually the coercion that is being offered is, take this vaccine or we'll shoot you. No, they're not saying that. They're saying, take this vaccine or you can't get your driver's license renewed.
No, take this vaccine or we throw you off welfare. That's what's being said. And it'll probably...
Okay, but so far, no one's ever actually received any notice of that. This is still a rumor at this stage. There's been no enforcement. The only thing we have is a WHO directive that allows our national health care system to be put under the auspices of the UN in the case of a pandemic. But it doesn't give them any enforcement. All it gives them is fear language. And we have to be really careful about this. So the repeating of the rumors that, yes, they're hiring for FEMA camp guards. Okay, big deal. There's 300 million people in this country. They can't build camps to put enough people in there to make a difference. You cannot hire enough guards. Our military is crumbling. Our dollar is going to collapse. They're not going to be able to pay these people, and it just goes on and on and on. So you've got to be real careful about the repetition of some of the fear language here. Yes, there's a whole lot of it out there saying, this will happen to you if you don't take the vaccine. But so far there's no evidence anywhere that any of it's actually being implemented that way. And I'm presuming that our data is correct and that the way we've seen things in the past will also work out. And that is to say that none of these rumors will ever actually prove to be true. Instead, though, there may indeed be other more nefarious kind of things going on. And in fact, the powers that be won't use guns. They'll try and do it with sweets as opposed to sour, and the first thing you're going to try and do is get at it through the kids. And unfortunately for them, that's actually going to stir up the biggest point of resistance. I think the refuseniks will arise as a result of people saying, my kid isn't going to get that concoction.
Mm-hmm. Well, fortunately, there are enough awake mothers and fathers out there these days because of the autism.
Correct.
Because of the human papillomavirus and the damage it has done to children.
Well, also because of the education on the Internet.
Yes.
So the rumors, to a certain extent, by promulgating the fear language, do cause at least some people to become motivated through fear to do research. But like I say, we need to be real careful about the repetition of what we assume to be true, because much of it is probably not. Yeah, I've seen the descriptions on Monster and some of the other places for the National Guard hiring internment and relocation people. But in order to do anything effectively with 300 million people, you're going to need a huge force, and they don't have the money to hire a huge force. Our government is currently in the process of coagulating and dying anyway, regardless of what they may say. And so even their best effort, even if they announced tomorrow we're going to hire 15 million people as internment camps, and you can come on in and get to beat all of your neighbors with sticks and herd them around in a camp and abuse them the way that we used to do as Nazis, you're not going to get that many people, because by the time they started that whole thing and getting it organized, our dollar is just going to be wiped out, and they're in a world of hurt with the rest of us.
Oh, boy. Wonderful.
Well, sort of. I mean, it's kind of a good thing, right? Fascism depends on a steady stream of dollars from a corporate sponsor, basically. And as the dollars die, so will corporate structures in a huge way.
And maybe we will all be free again, is what you're saying.
You will have to take it, but yeah, we're headed that way. Yeah,
headed that way. This sounds really positive. So let's come back and maybe talk about something really positive. We're talking with Clif High of Half Past Human. We're talking about his WebBot predictions, and we will be right back here on the Micro Effect Radio Broadcast Network. You are listening to Radio RN. You are listening to Radio RMN, and I'm talking with Clif High from the WebBot Project, and he was just about to say something positive. I can't believe it. But before we get back to this, I just got an email from someone that wants to join Ed Grimsley and Bob Oliver and wanted me to give the telephone number again. So if you live in California within an hour or two of Monterey Bay, give Bob Oliver a call at 831 383-2676, 831-383-2676, and I would really like to go. If I can clear my calendar and be there, I'm going to see if they'll let me come. You should come down and join us, Clif. I mean, it's only, an hour from Seattle?
Yeah, if you have one of those, floating triangles, but no, I'm just not in a position to travel. I've got too much work to do. So.
Let me tell you, I understand that completely.
But, try and get somebody to get some video of the stuff.
Well, they've got video of the stuff. Ed takes video of it, and it's all up on the Internet. But you've got to search very carefully, because there are people who take ordinary binoculars and look up in the sky, and they take pictures of birds and say that it's Ed's, alien armies. And so you've got to be real careful to make sure that you get Ed Grimsley's videos and no one else's.
Right.
But anyway, before we went to break, you said something that actually sounded positive.
Well, there is a very positive level of language, although we have to acknowledge that there's an artifact of our programming, and that is that negative language shows up first and foremost, and people express that more easily than they do commensurate level value language that's positive. So we have a tendency to concentrate on the negative simply because it's easier for us to find, and because people speak it more frequently or write it more frequently.
And we're all attracted to the negative rather than the positive. For some weird reason.
Well, I don't know if it's that so much as our times also have a tendency to force it out. I mean, it changes. The nature waxes and wanes, and that's part of our building and release of tension model or subcomponent. So it's not continuous that we get. I mean, we always get more negative language than positive, but the amount relative to each other, the ratio changes over time. In any event, though, we do have some positive streams there. that suggests that this fall we're going to see some kind of an announcement or a visible, that is to say, it'll show up in the global media stream somewhere, a visible announcement or other story about what we're calling the new electrics. And so the society that we have now, based on oil and scarcity and all of this kind of crud, amidst all of our earth changes here, will not exist in the main from, say, 2015 or 2017 onward. That social order will be based around what we're calling the new electrics, for lack of any other term, or a better term. And fundamentally, it's about a new way of thinking about energy, and it relates to energy as a function of where you are in hyperdimensional space, or however you want to think about that. Hyperspatial maths are involved, and it'll be sort of probably what we would think of as free energy today, although I'm not really sure what form it'll take. That's all emerging now. That's a subset of this idea of the contact thing. Now, also, that has a tendency, the whole idea of contact with space aliens, the acknowledgement of humans as a collective species with a common interest as such, and then the acknowledgement of our place in a larger galactic-centered universe will have some ramifications that will actually lead towards a reform movement that will be reformation like we've never seen on this planet before. And this reformation has, in the past, our data has, for instance, we've seen isolated little bits and pieces that are all forming into what we're calling the transformation metadata layer. So, for instance, in 2001, we started getting information from 2001 onward that suggested that the major religions, the monotheistic especially, were going to crumble and just go by the wayside here by around 2012, 2013. And we thought, oh, okay, what's going on there? And we saw that in isolation to the rest of the transformation elements. And those include, for instance, a gigantic political reformation around the planet, in which most of the existing what we would think of as political elite or political infrastructure over these next 3 or 4 years will be done away with, and we'll end up with something new. I'm not sure what we're going to call it or what it'll look like, but it won't look like this hierarchical, patriarchal system that we have now. They may not even have nation states at that stage, because maybe they're not really all that necessary anymore. I just don't know how that'll emerge. It'll obviously take a long time as we get humans oriented to it, but the grim side of it is that a lot of this change is accompanied by very large-scale social disruptions that are triggered by the failure of the dollar over this next year, that will include such nasty results as about probably 1.25 billion people dying over the next couple of years relative to the dollar being gone. So there's good and bad within that. Yes, we're going to go through Reformation, but like any other Reformation, including, our Revolution, the French Revolution, and so on, it's going to have a pretty gritty side to it as well.
Well, when you think that for the last maybe 200 years, all the nation states that exist on the planet now have been carved out by the owners of our Federal Reserve.
Yes.
And it's like, we can't have that. I mean, those were the evil ones, the ones that wanted us slaves.
I know. And we're still slaves. We have to acknowledge that. And we use the terminology in kind of a grim gallows humor. We say we're cube farmed, or we're a cube slave, or a wage slave, and acknowledge it ourselves.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But it's all changing. The death of the dollar has radical or potential for huge amounts of change across the planet. And the fact that it's coinciding with all of these other strangenesses, or what we call the high strangeness here of the Illuminati, probably, or Bilderbergers, whoever you want to tack the label onto, attempting to get rid of some of us and go down to the Georgia Guidestone level. I mean, this is basically absurd. I'm of the opinion, by the way, on a personal level, that we do not have overpopulation. We have a severe, stressful environment because of the way that we're living, collectively and individually. But that we could potentially support, maybe 100 billion people on this planet. We just don't know. Now, if we look historically, though, a lot of people are familiar with, like,